Hello and welcome to We Need to Name This, where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe with scholars of color. I'm Laura Ann Jacobs, and my co-host is
Ebony Bruce Harvey.
Today's episode is entitled Building Community and Creating My Unique Academic Space. We would like to introduce two brilliant, talented women of color scholars, Paulina Fraser and Erin Elliot, who will share their experiences with us. But first, we would like to share a bit about them. Paulina Fraser is a fifth-year PhD candidate in educational studies at the School of Education at the University of Michigan. As a first-generation Filipina American, Paulina's research interests include representation, counter-storytelling, and colonial histories. She is currently researching ethnic studies curricula and pedagogy, specifically around Filipinx American studies. Originally from California, Paulina Fraser received her Master's in Education with a concentration in equity and social justice at San Francisco State University. In her free time, Paulina enjoys laughing, soaking up the sun, and being near the water, cooking, NPR Tiny Desk concerts, face masks, and being around her community.
Erin Elliot.
Don't read my bio. Don't read it. It's not fair.
Okay, Erin Elliot is bomb, y'all. All right. And in this show, you're gonna find out why. So we're not gonna read her bio because
No,
you know what I'm saying.
I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Read her bio. She got a bio.
They're gonna find out that
Okay. All right. Cool. Erin Elliot is a multidisciplinary artist and doctoral student whose work strives to animate the lives of Black girls and women. She narrates in the Black feminist tradition, calling upon poetry, visual art, music, and literature as a way to study the interior of Black girls and women. So Erin, Paulina, we are so happy to have you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having us and for creating this space.
All right, you want to kick us off, Lauren?
I got it. So the way we've been starting off each episode with our guests is we ask, what brought you to academia, kind of to begin with.
So either one can.
Either one of you can start.
Okay, I'll jump in. I was not originally planning on going into academia. I actually wanted to join the Peace Corps. And then I did not do that. I went the non-traditional route. I went through community college first. And then after finishing that, I figured, you know what, why not keep going? It was fortunate enough for me to make it out because usually in community college, you don't get a lot of the access and resources to continue your higher education. So I was fortunate enough not to get stuck. I had a lot of resources through mentorship mostly. And so I continued on to San Francisco State University where I figured I got my bachelor's now, why not keep going? So I got my master's. I'm a first generation college graduate also. So I figured I made it this far, why not keep going with the master's, and then why not keep going with the PhD? I figured it meant too much to me and my family to be able to create and carve this space for myself in academia that the opportunity was presented to me and I decided to definitely take it. And so I figured that by having the capital of being able to hold a PhD, it was going to open not just doors for me, but also future generations to also my family and social networks around me of just having that institutional knowledge that going to college just, you are able to possess. And so I didn't grow up with a lot of people that finished past high school. And so I figured that it was going to be me to kind of carry that torch for the future generation. And so I took that as a responsibility and I saw it as an opportunity and a privilege. And so I never really looked back. I've been in school for the past 10 years nonstop. So I think it just became something that I knew I needed to do to create this path.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
For me, I had a very different journey. I originally wanted to be a nurse and went to school to be a nurse, and then got to my junior year and didn't have the grades. And so then I was like, well, I have to change majors. And I kind of this human development stuff. I kind of like the sociology stuff.
Mhm.
But then it was time to graduate or going into my senior year. And I'm like, I don't know if I can get a job in this humanities. Like, I don't, what is
Mhm.
this? They're not paying nobody in these humanities.
Mhm.
So, and not with the bachelor's. So I decided to go to nursing school. As predicted, I didn't want to be a nurse anymore. I wanted to be in the humanities.
Mhm.
And after one semester, I left and started applying. Well, I did like a almost like a concept map of all of these different things that I was interested in at the time. Like, and education was a big theme. Reading was a big theme. Black students and being a Black student was a big theme that kept coming up. And I was always interested in why people did what they did. So I applied to an ed psych program at NC State, which is where I got my master's.
Mhm.
And then once, I think maybe like the first week of class of the master's program, I had a Black woman professor named Dr. Patricia Marshall. And she walked into class and was just bad, you know, like just attitude, just, you know, like, I am a Black woman and I'm not going to make myself small to make you feel comfortable in this classroom. And I really respected that and I really admired that. And I was like, I want to be in academia. And then I got here and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be in academia. So that's that's how I got to University of Michigan, is like just being around other scholars. In NC State is like a rising hub of Black scholars and I think Black thought or in education. And I think I was there at the right time to kind of get connected with the right folks to get me here. For me, coming into this PhD program, I thought I wanted to be a faculty member. And I think what really may have happened is like I came here to, I mean, we are always going in places to find ourselves. Like, we're always on the search of self. And I think coming here after NC State and kind of getting the tools, the confidence in whatever like my gifts were starting to be known to me as, now transitioning here to Michigan, I feel like I'm kind of in this place where I feel this. My advisor actually said this in a panel of Black women for Black History Month, where like, if you want to be on the ground organizing, I wasn't even on the panel, so she wasn't talking to me, but she was like, if you want to be on the ground organizing and your work, you want it to be like impactful immediately, like that's not the academy. And the academy is like this intellectual space where it might take, you know, decades for people to actually get your work. And so ever since she said that, kind of put a little bug in my ear, like, do I really want to be here? And is the work that I'm doing really situated within the academy? Do I want it to be situated within the academy? And I think like coming from NC State, getting that confidence in myself and like what my ideas are, and then getting here now into a space where like I'm practicing and playing around with those ideas, I just feel like there's this competing interest that this creative person that I am and growing into wants to do versus like the academy and what I feel like I have to do to finish the PhD. And I think my work being invested in like a Black girlhood or Black womanhood project can be manifested in both of those routes, but they just look different, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can do Black girlhood stuff in the academy, but it looks different from like if I wanted to create a film on Black girlhood, you know, and the expectations are different, and the style is different, and the creativity is different, and like the ways that you evidence things are different. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm being led, but I'm not quite at a point yet where I feel like I need to be out. I'm also not having a terrible experience. I mean, it's a PhD in the pandemic, but I've just been telling myself, like, until I feel it'll be known to me when it's time, what it's time to do.
Right.
That's kind of where I am now. I'm just trying to be open to whatever is calling me, and not trying to read too much into signs that I may feel like I'm getting. Because I want to be able to, like, whenever it's time, you know, that's how you're walking by faith, and I want to be prepared for that. And I can't do that if I'm reading into it, you know, if
Yeah.
I'm interpreting things too much. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing. But I was just really interested because folks decide to leave academia all the time, right? So it's like just really interesting why people make that decision, right? So thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. All right. So getting back to our title, right? Building community and creating my unique academic space. the question that we have for you, our first question, besides what brought you to academia, is why is it important to build community as a graduate student? So often we get accepted to programs, we might go across the country, you know, in a space where we don't know anybody, we don't have family, anything like that. Tell me why it's important to you to build community while you're here, and the ways in which you've built community, or you've chosen to build community here in this space.
For me, I feel like it comes so natural. I don't even realize I'm doing it. And I interviewed for someone's dissertation recently, and this kind of thought process came along because he was emphasizing like, yo, you are doing organizing work, you are doing community work. And I'm like, am I? Like, I'm just existing around people who let me feel free to exist here, and then we get to create dope shit. And he's like, that's literally how a community kind of functions. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So for me, I guess it's so vital that it's like autopilot. Like I seek it out. And I remember like coming to Michigan and meeting folks for scholar visit day or something like that, incoming students day or something, and just feeling like, yo, there's a lot of Black women here and they are all dope. Like I remember meeting all three of you, I believe. And Ebony, I know I mentioned before, like I thought you were the moderator of the year for that panel. Okay.
Thank you for the love.
It was amazing. I feel like the first time I met LA, we kicked it off really well. I remember watching Paulina like spit these poems and being like, yo, this is dope. So, and I was like, I need to find a way to be friends with those people. Those people they have a community here, and I need to find and go and get that. And I feel like as soon as I got here, like a week or two after, Ebony and I went to breakfast maybe with another friend, and it just kind of like downhilled from there, or spiraled out of control, I guess. And from there,
in a good way.
Yeah, the same thing happened with me in Detroit. I just like started seeing a hairstylist. Her energy and my energy were really good. We became really good friends. And she, because she's a hairstylist, like started connecting me with all these other people. And now I have a community out in Detroit of like Black creative women who are doing amazing projects. And so I feel like for me, it's very natural, but it's also like an authentic part of who I am. Like it's not about gaining anything. It's just about like, where can I go where I can feel understood and where I can feel like it's safe to be me. And when I do that, it just ends up being, I'm either joining a community, creating a community within a community. Like, so yeah.
I think supportive community is necessary, right? Because you can't do this work alone. You're not supposed to, right? Historically, as people of color, we have always been coalition building. We have always been supportive, and we have always been in community. So I think that to do the work that I do, I have to also live it and model it. And the best way to do that is by being in community with amazing, brilliant people who are also for liberation, for humanization, who are down, like really down. And I think it's community that can hold space for you, not just when it comes to researching your PhD, but also when it just comes to your personal life, right? Because just because you're in grad school and in this academic bubble, life is still happening. And sometimes you need support personally to help keep you grounded and to remind you that you're a whole person, you're a whole being outside of this PhD, outside of academia. So I think it is imperative to have community around you in spaces like this, especially.
Yeah, so Paulina, you're just sharing with us that this work is not easy and you need to have people around you that's really supporting you, right? And Erin, you mentioned the fact that it's being in spaces where you feel loved and you feel full and you feel you get energy from folks, you know what I mean? And so I want to ask each of you, just like your advice, like when someone comes into a PhD program and they may not be as outgoing as you two are, because you two are very outgoing. You're just like, oh, I like you, I'm gonna come talk to you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how y'all are. But everybody's not like that. What advice would you give for folks who are maybe not as outgoing on how they can like start to create community or reach out to folks or find spaces where they feel full?
I think, to be honest, to find spaces that make you feel full, you have to know what you hunger for. You have to know what you're thirsting for. You have to know that need and name it. And I think that requires knowing who you are. And actually, at least for me, at a predominantly white institution, being a woman of color and being Filipina, I felt very, very isolated at times, to the point where I started really questioning, do I know who I am in this space? And I think it gets to be really dangerous, right? Because if you lose that sense of self, if you kind of forget who you are, then you also forget to listen to yourself when you're telling yourself what you need. And that's the most important things you need to hold on to in this space, is yourself and your voice. And once you figure out, you know, I know who I am, I'm not going to let this institution rob me of my sense of self. Once you have that grounded and you can listen to kind of that internal voice telling you like, hey, you know what, I feel isolated, I need some support. Or, hey, you know what, I feel lonely, I need some love. Or, hey, I feel like an imposter, I need some affirmation. Once those needs met, right, all you have to do is be brave enough to ask for them. And I think showing up, being authentically yourself. One time I heard, to make a friend, you got to be a friend. To be vulnerable, to be authentic, to be brave with folks that either share your interests or who you trust or who you feel you can just vibe with and share energy with. Those are going to be your people. And it's imperative to find your people, right, that are definitely going to uplift you, that are going to be able to hold space for you, and vice versa, because we all find a time when we need it. So I think it's definitely about knowing what you need and then just being able to advocate it for yourself, because nobody is going to advocate that for you like you can in academia.
Yeah.
Retweet. I mean, literally, I was gonna say, like, I think you have to know yourself first. So Paulina hit the nail on the head for sure.
All right, so I'm gonna pass it off to Lauren Ann for the next question.
Okay. Ebony, we've switched.
I realized that.
Is that okay? Okay,
I got
okay.
too excited. I was like, oh my gosh.
I know, I just want to make sure.
I'm loving these women. I want to ask them a question.
I know. I have like
I'm sorry.
I have a bunch more, and they're going to send us all in different directions. I'm going to try to stick to the ones we planned for. So, so my question for you both is, what can a supportive community look like? I mean, so we're talking about knowing yourself and understanding your needs. I think Paulina, you said knowing what you hunger for is how we know, you know, to seek for what fulfills you, and nourishes you, right? So what does that look like in terms of spaces or people or actions? And I know, Erin, you mentioned community in Detroit. Like, so when we talk about finding community in graduate school, sometimes people think it's limited to within our school, within our department, within our program. And, you know, community can be so much broader than that, and is necessary to sustain us. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about what different types of supportive communities look like and the networks that you've established during your time as a graduate student.
They make space for, like, I think the biggest part about community that I enjoy is like they make space for imperfection. And I just thought, I was trying to write down all of the things, and then I started talking and lost every single one of the things. Hold on. Ask me your question again. Like, what are the things that make up of a community? Like, what does it feel like?
Yeah, what does it feel like? It could be spaces or people or actions. When someone says, like, I feel, you know, this program's so isolating, or graduate school so isolating, I feel so lonely, like, and I don't know what would fill me, or I need to know, like, how do I know this is my community space? What are the qualities maybe that have sustained or nourished you in your time? What do you seek out?
Wow, way to reframe. What an interviewer.
That's graduate education, you know.
Okay. Excellent. For me, I think, okay, so yeah, there are spaces that allow for some forgiveness around these standards that we're supposed to be, and like allow you to be who you're going to become. But another big component of it, I think, of finding community in grad school is like get you some friends outside of grad school. I tweeted that the other day, and there were a lot of people who agreed that you do in fact need friends outside of grad school, friends who not just like outside of your grad school, outside of grad school generally. And I think it helps to have some friends who are local to the area who aren't in grad school either. That way, like, you just get these different perspectives on life, and it allows for a variety of experience. And I think something one of you all was saying was that the grad school program can be so isolating oftentimes if you move far away, that if you don't like the people in your cohort or you're not liking your program, like, this grad school process becomes your entire life, and then you don't have any life vests. And a good community is a life vest in those moments to me, right? When I'm just like, I'm over it, I can go to that community member or a part of my community, we can have a conversation, and then I'm hearing about their problems, and it puts my problems back into context. And I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't the worst thing in the world, or maybe it was just a bad day, or, this is what it's just like to be a Black woman in the academy. And no matter what I want to change, like, if I want to continue in this journey, I can do what I want on the ground now, but I might not feel those effects. It might be 4 generations of graduate students after me who feel those effects of whatever it is that's happening. So, yeah, I think that's been the biggest thing for me, especially during the pandemic, because grad school friends sometimes are weird, and they only want to talk about grad school. They only want to talk about papers. They only want to talk about your research. And while I enjoy doing those things, sometimes it adds an additional level of stress if I just want to hang out with you and now you're only talking about grad school stuff, or now we're in a pandemic and, like, we can't see each other in person. I only like 3 people in my cohort. 3 people in my cohort also busy as hell. We all doing the same things, right? But now I have, like, friends in Detroit or other friends in the Ann Arbor area, and I'm like, we can talk about whatever. Like, we can just, I actually don't even tell people I'm getting a PhD if they're not in the program or it's not about academic related things. So that was a long answer to say, diversify your community.
Yes.
That is important.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I also echo that. I feel very privileged. I have a pretty solid community outside of graduate school with, childhood friends back in California. And I think that those relationships are, it's harder to maintain while in a PhD program, but it is so much more important to sustain because I really feel like they help me to remember my roots. They help keep me humble. They're not from the institution, and they also remind you that there's life outside of a PhD. I feel like for like 5 to 7 years, it feels like PhD this, PhD that, the academy this, the academy that, and it's really easy to get lost in the midst of this world because it's a whole nother world. It's its own culture. There's a whole separate entity that you're really like having to embody and navigate. And so when you have connections, as Erin was saying, outside of that, and you have this diverse community, it brings, I think, the perspective of like, right, this isn't all of me. There's more to me than this. There's more to me than the research I'm doing, than, my PhD. And I think that it's important to also remember that, at least for me, like my background and my, networks and my families and my friends, they're not of the academy. So when I tell them certain things about the PhD, they're like, okay, and there's nothing more humbling than somebody being like, and so from someone I love, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, right. Okay, let me go ahead and stay humble. Like, what am I actually doing besides getting, this certificate that says I got a PhD now? So I think it's really important to stay connected, especially to those roots. I also think that like community can look like your passions, right? So for me, a lot of my community is these creative spaces where I just instinctually needed a space of other creatives, of poets, of singers, of artists. I didn't come from a traditional like educator background with, parents that were teachers or anything, but I came from storytellers. I came from, artists, singers, healers. So it's not surprising that, education found me, but it's very different. So I think that having spaces where also just educators looks different is important for me too, because I get to feed off that energy. I get to give to that energy. And it just makes for a much more authentic experience to what I'm actually doing, so that I'm not keeping it on paper. I'm not keeping it in theory. I'm actually like embodying it with the people I'm with and the art that we're creating and the things we're doing. And I think something that's really important too to know is that being from California, where there's a huge Asian Pacific Islander community, I hungered for other Filipino doctoral students. And coming to Michigan to PWI, it hurt my heart to not find that so easily at University of Michigan. I think, you know, I'm lucky now because I've been able to, after 5 years, create those spaces of, you know, Filipino, Asian American, Pacific Islander communities. But when I first came here, it was whack, like period. But I did find that it was mostly Black women who really became my sister friends, who couldn't necessarily fill that role I was looking for, but they filled me with the love, support, and affirmation I still needed. And I think that's really what it comes down to when it comes down to your community. Because sometimes you can't always find or recreate the exact spaces with the exact people you need, but you can actually leverage and maximize on the love and on the joy and on the care and kindness that is available and accessible. You just have to be really open to receiving that. And so I'm like super grateful for, I think, definitely the Black community at the School of Education that really like opened their arms to me and helped me create and also extend my community. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely been a way that I've just felt really blessed with the people and the spaces I've been around and in.
So I want to follow up on some stuff that y'all said. So I want to first start with the fact that you both have mentioned that it's absolutely necessary to have connections outside of academia. So my question for you all is, how do you maintain those relationships? And thinking about like all that academia comes with, right? You're super busy, right? So how do you maintain those relationships that are outside of academia? And then also like when you do have relationships with folks who are maybe not local, how are you making sure that you maintain those relationships? Because we're in a program for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? How do you, in what ways or things that you do to maintain those relationships and keep them strong?
Okay. Paulina looked like she was about to go. I feel like Zoom is like this double dutch that happens. Yeah. So I would say for me, it's about being honest with them about where I'm at, what I need, and how I can support them. And then being very clear about what I need for support and what that looks like for me. So sometimes it's my friends in Detroit, like on a random day that we all happen to be off, I'm just like, okay, well, I'm deciding not to do my work this afternoon because I really need to hang out with my homegirls. But that doesn't happen. That doesn't get to happen every single week. You know, they might hang out more frequently and I can only see them once a month or something like that. And then my best friend lives in California, and even before that, she was in DC while I was in North Carolina, and we just made an effort like twice a year to see each other. And we would go on girls' trips, or she would come visit, vice versa. And I think that has been really helpful for me. I don't think I've actually had too many complaints about my friends or community, like members not feeling supported by me while I'm in grad school. I feel like because I know how stressful grad school is, I kind of go above and beyond in that communication process to make sure like that I'm meeting needs, that my needs are being met. And that's kind of a constant conversation, I think, throughout all of my relationships, is just checking in and wanting to be sure, and where can I readjust, and where do I need to like put somebody on a back burner because I have a paper to write this week. And yeah, but I also just really, I think my community is more important to me than this PhD is. And I know that for a fact. And if my PhD if a project or assignment has to be put on the back burner because I need to be with my community, or I need to like get community, then that's what's going to happen, so that I can be whole and that they can be whole.
Yeah, I think this question really resonates with me because I kind of had to learn the hard way. I think the first year or so that I was here, I had no idea how to maintain or sustain relationships or the importance of that. I dedicated a lot of myself and well-being to this program and realized very quickly that it is not a reciprocal relationship. It is unhealthy. So I had to, definitely learn that hard way, that you need to sustain these relationships, and that, as Erin said, it is, at least for me, and as Erin stated, so much more important to us than just completing this degree, right? I think relationships are so important to well-being. So I think for me now, I think it's about creating a lifestyle that doesn't require me to play catch up with my friends and family and loved ones, with my community. I really try to create a lifestyle where I'm not rewarding myself with rest or with joy or time to play and hang out with friends, right? I see that now as deserving and needing to be built into my schedule. So I'm very intentional about maintaining these relationships by being as consistent as possible and treating them just as important as, you know, a work meeting or a academic deadline. And I'm also very transparent, letting my people know when I'm struggling and how I need these friends to show up. So I think that's really important in terms of being just really open about where we're at in the program. And, you know, if you're thriving, that's beautiful. If you feel like you're failing and you're not, you know, you're not making the progress you think you need to be making, then I think just being honest about that and letting your community show up for you is just one of the beautiful things about community, right? And they can help you be accountable. They can help you write. They can help you keep to a time schedule. And so I think that leaning on community and creating a space where they are part of my day-to-day routine is how I sustain these relationships, not seeing them as something that I come to when I'm done or I come to when I'm empty, right? I see it as, I see my people as being important for my own self-preservation in the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I have a community here in New York, as you all know, and I make sure, like, as soon as I got a moment, my butt is in New York. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much is that trip on Spirit? Like, what? How much is that plane ticket? $55? I'm coming, you know? That's when, you know, pre-pandemic days. But yeah, I think it's like super important. And I think, as you both mentioned, like, they help, you know, you balance your thinking. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, academia is cool. I'm taking these classes, but no, there's a real life outside of this thing you doing, and you need to attend to that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I mean, I just get joy from, like, my one of my really good friends, Randall, his daughter's birthday's in the summer, and I look forward to her birthday party every summer. I'll make myself available in New York for a little kid's birthday party because we're running around having fun and I'm taking pictures of all of them, you know? So I think it's really, really important to maintain those relationships because it keeps you sane. It really keeps you sane. And I thank you, Paulina, for just sharing the truth about not being able to balance that in the beginning, saying, like, you know, I'm pouring all this to academia and academia does not love me back. You know what I'm saying? So what does that look like to really, like, switch and transition to, like, really getting fed from my relationships, and what does that mean in terms of my responsibilities here, but also my mental health, my well-being, my emotional health, my joy, my peace, my sanity. So thank you both for sharing. So I have another question for you all, because you both are creatives and you're just so awesome.
Eb.
I know. One more question, and then I'll pass it off.
The same questions down.
I promise. Okay, I'm gonna pass it off.
You go. There you go.
Okay.
You're a better master. I love it.
So you both are creatives. And so my question is, how do you continue to develop your, you know, in your creative spaces with all the responsibilities that you have in academia, right? So I know this is not quite, because I mean, it's a part of your self-care, right? It's a part of the community spaces that you're in. So how do you continue to develop when you have all these responsibilities, papers, pre-orals, dissertations, you know what I'm saying? 1 million meetings in one day, back to back. Like, how do you make sure that you are continuing to develop your crafts that you're both a part of?
I would say that I think for me, developing in your creative spaces. I think for me, it was about making the intentional shift and also the brave choice to insert the personal into the professional. I think for a little bit, I was kind of hesitant to kind of cross that boundary between, you know, my love for the arts, my creativeness, and all of that with academia because I didn't want them to mingle. I really just wanted to keep them separate. And then I think, you know, through time, I started realizing and meeting people that were doing it. I was meeting artists, I was meeting poets, I was meeting writers who were doing the very same thing in their, you know, own academic journeys. And to see that it was not only possible, but you could do it well. You could do it with freedom. You could do it with, you know, your creativity. You can do it with your authenticity. I started seeing more examples of that and being introduced to even more examples of that. And so I think for me, I started realizing like, hold on. Like this is not only being done, but I can do it too. And so I think that at first it was hard, right? Because I was like, am I a poet here or am I a scholar? Like, how am I supposed to do this literature review poetically? Like, let's be real. And so it took a lot of, you know, trial and error. It was an ebb and flow process where I was losing my voice, finding my voice, losing my voice, finding my voice. And the writing process was, you know, it was a true challenge as a writer, as a scholar, as a creative, anything. It was definitely a personal journey of finding that voice. But I think that when I did truly find it, and as I'm continuing to find and create it, it felt so much more authentic to me because it didn't feel like I had to, you know, balance all these different responsibilities and then make time for, you know, my joy and passion through the arts. I was able to combine them both in a way that was truly authentic and honorable to me. It didn't feel like I was exploiting my love for poetry or for writing. It didn't feel like, you know, I was losing the joy in it either. It felt like I had blended such beautiful worlds that I am a part of into one. And I think it was also important to know that I did reserve sacred parts for just me, right? Like I do think that there's an importance of boundaries when it does come to discerning like what does the academy deserve and what do I want to keep for myself. I do think that that boundary still should and does need to exist. And so there are parts where I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and keep this one for myself. But for the most part, I definitely feel that I've made that intentional shift to go ahead and blend, you know, poetry and writing together to fit into, you know, these academic spaces in a way that, you know, is accessible for people to read too, because I think that's what poetry does. It's human. People see it and they can relate to it. And I think for me, it's been this like means of accessibility of like, how can I do the work I'm doing and then present it in a way that people can receive it and respond to it, not just as this academic jargon, but as something real and human. And so I think that's what poetry has always been for me. And I think it's been, you know, one of the stepping stones that I actually needed to be the scholar I am today.
For me, I would say that similar to Paulina, like I can't be, and Solange says is I can't be a singular expression of myself. There's too many layers. And I feel like that probably drives my professors and my advisor a little more wild than it does me. I feel like I just, you know, am asking questions and they're like, that's too big of a question. And I'm like, but how can we talk about these things if we're not talking about the fullness of them? And it does a disservice if I have to wear one hat or be one version of myself and I discount the rest of it because in truth, it's coming with me. I just don't acknowledge it. And that's a disembodiment that I don't want to have. So I think I just treat the PhD as a job. So it gets my 40 hours a week and then that's it. And then I have the other 80 hours or however many other hours there are in a week to live my best life, to make time for joy and pleasure, as Paulina was mentioning. And a lot of that is like creative projects that I get to do with my friends. And I just set my boundaries with the PhD. Because it has boundaries for me. So I try to reciprocate those boundaries of like, where do I need to draw the line because I am being sucked up too much into this idea that I need to do something a very particular way, and where do I need to make space for myself to enter into this work. And I think that has been helpful for me. And why I'm in the predicament that I'm in now. Like, I feel like it's been so helpful that now I'm like, is it time to take this into a new direction? Is it time to maybe like step this up a little bit and think more critically about what this could look like full time and being serious in this creative endeavor? And I want to be animating lives. So what does it mean to be a filmmaker and to do a docu-series, or, you know, stuff like that. Issa Rae talks about like, do what you can with what you have right now. And that's how she started with her Awkward Black Girl web series.
Yes.
And I just feel like super inspired by that, and have been trying to like create things with what I have right now and the time that I have right now. And it's like, people are seeing the work, they like the work, they're asking me to create work for them. And yeah, so I just feel like, do what you can with what you have, and make and set those boundaries, and then you can figure out how to make space for all of you. But if you are so flooded with the PhD or so flooded with graduate school and devote your entire existence to it, then you'll never find out this like other part of yourself, or be in tune with it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it off to Laura Ann, because you know I could go on for days. So go ahead, Laura
No,
Ann.
you draining out my question bank, haven't you? I still got a few. I still got a few. I've loved so much about what each of you are sharing, and I was also going to ask this question about you both being creatives and being artists, and both of you, I think, such a strong theme, and what both of you have said today is about being true to yourself and knowing yourself and finding a way that you don't have to like sacrifice or hide a piece of who you are when you do a PhD program. And you know, Evie and I invited both of you because you've both designed your own programs in graduate school. And so, you don't have to go into, you know, more than you'd like, but I was wondering, for people who, you know, our audience are people who are considering applying for PhDs, first gen, who might be like scrolling through websites being like, I don't know if that program's for me. I don't know if this fits for me. Like, can I get a PhD? Because I don't see myself fitting into these things. Like, you know, super clearly, I want to do more than that. I feel like I can expand beyond that or blend across these things. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about what the process of creating your own program is, creating your own major, and then maybe advice that you might have for people who might be in a similar state of mind.
I am in an individualized concentration, but it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm designing my own program. Like, it's still very much, I still have very clear requirements on what I need to get, and there are a decent amount of requirements still. And so I think Paulina could probably speak more to that aspect. I would say if you're considering graduate school and you like, I don't see myself necessarily fitting into any of those categories, that might be a sign that maybe you don't fit into any of those categories and you don't want to. And so I would ask you to investigate that and make sure that it is something that you want to do. I think forcing, because you want a PhD, trying to make it fit with something that is as rigorous in terms of an emotional load, in terms of a mental load of just like day-to-day existing in the academy, is not something that you just want to like walk into because it's a PhD. I think fit is incredibly important, and not just the fit of the program itself, but the people who are in the program ahead of you, the faculty members that are there, how they're defining and talking about community. And sometimes like in those conversations you will find, that's when I found out that Paulina was getting an individual, or I don't even know exactly what they call it, individualized concentration degree in education. And I was like, oh, that's a possibility now. Now I feel like, okay, I don't have to try to fit as much as I already was doing. Maybe I only have to try to fit just a tiny bit. And so you have to like reconcile with those trade-offs as well. I think there's never going to be a program that fits you perfectly and your interests perfectly, but you want to be able to find a place that like has people who are doing elements and components of what it is that you're interested in, and preferably more than one person who is doing it. So even if the program itself is maybe like foundations of education, but you're like, I really just want to be policy, and there's two professors who are doing the kind of policy work that you're doing, then that is a good sign, I think, for sure. But definitely don't want to pick a program that there's nobody there, but it sounds nice. That is a red flag for sure.
Yeah, so I did not start in the individually designed concentration program. I actually started in a house program in educational studies that was literacy, language, and culture. And for me, it came because I was in an equity and social justice program for my master's at San Francisco State. And one of my mentors specialized in racialized literacy, Black woman scholar, Dr. Doris Flowers. And she had really helped me find and kind of navigate around my interests when it came to language and culture and race specifically. And so when I came to University of Michigan, I definitely came with a specific interest and also a very specific ideology of how I was conceptualizing what the program I was interested in probably would be. And so I kind of found through some trial and error that it was a little bit different than what I thought it would be. As you find out in the program and getting a PhD. And I also found that I was connecting to different faculty in different programs a lot easier. And I stayed in the program for a couple of years because I was also just younger going into the program. I was in my early 20s. And so I think I had this really, radical approach of like, no, I'm gonna beat these doors down. I'm gonna redefine this program for them. I'm going to passion my way through this and they're going to see that I fit. And I did not fit. I found myself trying to prove my worth and prove my scholarship in ways that just did not make sense for the program. And to credit, LLC is a great program. It was not a great fit for me personally, of how I stood on the foundations of what I thought literacy, language, and culture was going to be. So that to be said, I think that I was trying to create this fire out of wet stones and wet firewood. When really, I think I started getting hints of this individually designed concentration program, and I heard little whispers here and there of people who had done it, and it sounded like this really mystified thing. And I started realizing like somebody was fanning some flames for me because I realized that that actually is where my fire was stoked. And on educational foundations and policy, but also history, also Filipino American studies. And there was no program like that for me in the School of Education. And so I think that once I kind of figured out the logistics, one, of an individually designed program, because there's the paperwork behind it, there's the people who support that what you're doing is valid. Once I kind of got the logistics out the way, and I found my argument to advocate for that, it was like the flame just erupted. It was no more like trying to create, a fire out of a spark. It just was a whole thing. So I think from that, I realized the importance of staying authentic and true to who you are and going to places where you feel welcomed and received and loved instead of trying to continually prove yourself in spaces that just don't fit for you. I think for, a while I tried to fit and I just couldn't. And so I think I saw that at first as a loss when really I was able to reframe it as actually being one of the best gains for myself because I was able to reframe, reshift myself as a scholar, my research interests, and it felt so much more authentic. It felt like I was actually just letting go of something I was holding on to that was dragging me down for so long. So I right before my preliminary exams, which meant that I had to kind of create that process of what that looked like. I had to get a few more faculty on board to create the individually designed programs committee that usually don't work within the usual programs. And so there was a lot of behind the scenes that, there was some labor that was involved, but ultimately I felt like I had a lot of agency and power in being able to design everything I was about to do. After, the first few years of just fighting and fighting and fighting, I felt like this was actually worth it. The labor was worth it for me. And so I think that as a takeaway, one of the important things that I realized and that I would probably tell myself back then would be talk to the students there. That are in the different programs, not just the program you like, but different programs, because the people there are resources, right? They're the ones taking the classes. They're the ones with their journeys. They're the ones who are really going to give you that insight that matters. And the second one would be look at the faculty in the program and their scholarship. not just the program's description, because that could look like, you know, cake and roses all day long. But what it really comes down to is who's teaching these classes, right? And what are they actually about? What is their scholarship about? Is it aligned with anything you're interested in? And so I think just that alone, I think would have helped me realize that I could have started in an individually designed program. And that would have probably made the journey a little bit easier. But I mean, I think it was worth it in the grand scheme of things. But that's to say that, you know, an example, if you start this program and you realize you're on the wrong, you know, you're on the wrong track, you could still be on the right path. It's just gonna take you a little longer, it might be a little more, but you know, you end up where you need to end up.
That's an awesome response. And I think too, the question of like, you know, well, I'm thinking about the series, we're talking about people who are at different places in the journey and may at some moments experience self-doubt or wonder like, what am I doing here? Like, you know, this isn't working, so I gotta go. Like, it is nice to hear also that they're, you know, academia may tell you it's not the place for you and it's always trying to push us out. But we, you know, there are other alternatives and there are ways to like find our own path and let our own light shine. So I think it's really awesome, inspiring to hear from you. I do have another question, but I can see that we're kind of hitting the time, so I can save it for another day.
Do you all have a few more minutes, or you all gotta go?
I have a few more minutes.
Okay, so you want to throw that question out, Lauren?
Yeah, okay, I'll ask it. So, you know, some of the purpose of why we're doing the series also is for people who are first gen. You know, Ebony and I both talked about how, you know, our families or our communities that are outside of graduate school, like it's sometimes hard to talk about milestones or accomplishments. I know Erin, you talked about definitely setting those boundaries so that you're not just like blabbering on about your papers nonstop with your family or your friends and your community. But also, how do you share about those things with your community in ways that invite them to share the joy that you may feel as you go through the program? Sometimes, you know, maybe you just defended your proposal or you just passed your prelim and, you know, it's just a paper. It's just a paper, it's just stupid paper, you know, but how do you, you know, also, you know, share that joy with your community?
I think to share the joy with your people, you also have to share the struggles, right? Like, I think in the beginning, when I was in my PhD program, after my acceptance, of course, once I got here and I was in it, everyone was just kind of like, cool, yeah, you're doing it. And when I had my little milestones, my family was just like, you know, they were supportive, but they weren't invested. They had no idea. They didn't know the language. They didn't know what the milestones were. They didn't really know anything. And it wasn't until I really hit, I think, the crossroads when I found myself not feeling right in the program I was in and deciding if academia was for me, I actually had to take a leave of absence. And it was during that leave of absence, also just personally, I really actually was experiencing some depression, and I kept quiet about it. You know, I thought that I was the only one. I thought that I didn't have the thick skin enough to make it through the PhD program. I was all the things, you know, I had a really hard time believing in myself. And, you know, I think through that process, through therapy, through support, through love, you know, I was able to see through that depression, right? And I was able to switch my programs and get into the individually designed concentration program. And, you know, step after step, things were finally looking up for me. And I realized my family had no idea what I was going through. I was in a PhD program somewhere in Michigan. And so it came a time when, you know, they asked me how school was doing. And I told them, like, I was depressed this past semester. I took a leave of absence. I stopped. I almost dropped out. I missed home. I missed family. I missed love. I felt, you know, I had all these thoughts. And it was a really hard moment because in Asian culture, Filipino culture, we're not emotional, you know, as many communities of color are. Honestly, it's unfortunate. But it, you know, it was a moment that I think I needed to share with them because at the time I was being authentic. But I look back at that time and I think now, to just defending my proposal. And it was a different win because my family knew how much I had been through to get to this point. it wasn't just like, yay, Paulina did it. Like, we're so happy for you. I opened up to them at that point. That was so hard for me and so scary to tell them, like, yo, I didn't know if I could do it. And, you know, like, I don't know if I want to come home or not. And for them to see me at such a low point, it felt, you know, scary. It felt vulnerable. It felt empowering. It felt all the things, but I really didn't realize how much of a seed I was planting for my future accomplishments. Because in order to feel the joy and excitement and love I felt a week ago when I told them that I'm now ABD, it would have never happened had I not shared to them how much I struggled and fight through the worst of this program. And so for me, I think it got to a point where in order to really revel in the joy, I really had to be vulnerable with my people about where I'm struggling, on what points, you know, did this thing try to beat me down? And it does, right? And I think we try to really put on a happy face of like, no, we're good, it's fine, it's fine. And it came to a point where I was like, yeah, no, I'm not good. My mental health is not good. I need some help. And I think that was the bravest thing I could have done. And also it set me up for the joy that I was able to receive, and so much love and so much understanding. There was just so much affirmation and so much, I felt so seen by my family who once didn't even understand what this meant to get a PhD. And now they still don't completely understand, but they feel with me. They know because they've seen me at that low point. So I think that for me to share the joy meant to share the struggle, to share in that vulnerability, and to be authentic with those that love us the most, because that's how their care really shows up for us. So thank you for letting me make that spiel, because that's been recent on my heart. And so thank you all for that.
Thank you for sharing.
Shorter.
Sharing in this space with us.
I have a really tough time like sharing and not being casually dramatic, where I just like drop important things in a group chat and just keep talking about whatever was happening, and people are like, wait, what happened? Wait, hold on, wait. And I'm like, yeah. So, and I also haven't hit any like big milestones per se in the program other than like finishing first year, and which is a big milestone in itself. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think it is difficult sometimes to share, but that's the thing about community, is like you create a space where you are vulnerable enough to like share the difficult things, and so they do appreciate the wins also as you are learning to appreciate the wins. And I just feel like I have a really wonderful community that like lets me and actually encourages me to brag on myself more and celebrate myself more, because I just am like, well, this is regular and this is just a part of the process or whatever, whether that's for the academy or in outside things. So I'm actually very grateful that I do have people who are like, no, we should brag more. We need to talk about this. We need to be sharing this with people. Otherwise, it is easy to not want to share because you feel like either you're always sharing or like it's like they don't understand the significance of it, and so you just hold it to yourself. My grandparents for sure think I'm just like, I think in Zoom school, and are always like, why are you so busy? And I'm like, at this point with them, I'm like, I don't know if it's worth, you know, detailing that it's something else. Like, we'll be in Zoom school forever. And I think, Pauline, I don't know if you've had this experience, or Laura Ann or Ebony, like sometimes it's just not worth it. It's almost more stressful sometimes to like detail the significance of something. And so you have to pick and choose who are going to be your people that you can share things with, and they're going to go up, you know, they're going to like be more excited about whatever it is that you're sharing than you. And then you have those people that you already know, like you'll just tell them casually the next year when you see them at Christmas, like this happened.
I definitely understand that. Because it is a lot of work to like really get down and explain like every single thing that you're doing and how this connects to that, and like what these milestones mean and all that kind of stuff. But just as Paulina had also mentioned, it's like when you do have that group, like you're saying, Erin, that group that you're going to confide in, it's really important to like tell them all so they really understand like what you're going through, the ups and the downs. And it's like, It's always like, I feel like my people outside of academia like get more hyped than academic people when I like accomplish something. They're like flipping tables and doing backflips. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, isn't that serious? I get, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely understand. I definitely understand why it's just so important. For me personally, you know, it's been my parents. And I have like 5 or 6 very, very close friends, and we have a group chat. And so anytime something's going down, we're like, look, this is what's happening. I need prayer here. Or like, yo, can you just hit me up? I haven't heard from y'all in a while. Or listen, I'm working on a dissertation. Like I came up when I was pregnant, and one of my best friends, Michael, I was like, I need accountability. Like I need you to come over here and do whatever work that you typically do in front of me. So I'm writing this thing, because right now I will get snacks and sit in front of the TV, and a whole day will pass and I have a deadline, you know? And he came over and he was like, all right, for the next week, I'm gonna be sitting here. We're gonna be looking at each other. We're working for 8 hours. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what you're doing. You don't know what I'm doing, but we got each other. You know what I mean? So I definitely understand like how important it is to just even have folks who you're very close to, who know like what you're doing and can continue to push you, you know, and just celebrate you in ways that like academics just don't know how. So yeah.
And that's why you need friends outside of grad school.
Exactly. Coming back to the point, full circle.
Because when we're just in grad school, it becomes so normal, and people are like, oh, I went through that. Even if it was traumatic, they're like, oh, I went through that already. Like, you can do it, you know? And when people don't, when people aren't familiar with the experience, they get excited about the wins, or when they see you like really been grinding, they get excited about whatever the product is, versus like now you're just in a room full of PhDs who are like, yeah, we did our dissertations too. So like, okay.
I'm like, oh, but I just wrote like 300 pages.
It's that hazing, it's the academic hazing.
Yeah, for real. Oh, thank you, ladies, so much for just sharing your stories.
Yeah.
For, you know, just being able to share, you know, your experiences with folks who will really benefit from just demystifying academia and knowing that if it's something they want to do, that they can thrive. And if it's something that they don't want to do, they can reflect on that and say like, you know what, maybe that's not for me. You know what I'm saying? So I really, really appreciate you ladies just taking the time to be a part of this project.
Absolutely. Y'all shared such wisdom and like joy, and just like shared just like so much about yourselves and who you are, and the, you know, the way that you make the things that you're attuned to as you make decisions on your own journey that that are just so beautiful and you know, and inspiring. And I have great admiration for both of you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Just dropping gems, you know, dropping gems.
For real though. I mean, picking them up. Get them up. Get them up.
Thank you for putting this together and creating this video series project. Wakata has been just, y'all have been doing it. Y'all planted something so beautiful that SWE I think will really cherish and continue to cherish. But this video series project I think is so well timed and so needed. So thank y'all for filling that gap, because it's been long overdue, and I know people will really, really appreciate this. I know I would have if I saw something like this before I came to UMich. So thank you all.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, this is really amazing, and I look forward to seeing how it grows.
Yeah, thank you. We love you all, and continue to thrive and get all the love you need. You know what I'm saying? Text me if you need hugs and kisses, because I'll be like, hey boo. You know what I'm saying? I left a message for you on Instagram, just like, So let me tell you something. I was just like, why your voice sound like honey though? And honey is a sound, okay? Like, I was like, her voice literally sounds like honey, okay?
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And then we talking to the mic.
Go ahead. Go ahead with the mic. You are official. I'm here on my laptop, like trying to get closer as I talk. I need the equipment.
Period. Thank you so
nice seeing you all.
See y'all soon. Bye.
See you.
Thank you for joining us for We Need to Name This, a series where we unpack the hidden curriculum of academe. Join us for our next episode, Being My Authentic Self in Academia, with Monet Cooper. For more information, visit www.weneedtonamethis.com.